Alafia and good afternoon. I'm Dr. James Conyers, Director of Africana Studies here at Kean University, and as always, my pleasure to welcome you to this year's, the 2017 Office of Africana Studies African History Month celebration. This year, we chose very purposefully the theme that we're going to be exploring today and that we've been exploring all week, the theme of African people in the criminal justice system. And I think I don't need any further elaboration on it. You know that's an important theme. And those of you who were here yesterday heard Dr. Tyrone Powers, and the day before we heard Brother DeLacy Davis of BCAP, Black Cops Against Police Brutality, lay out the scenario of how and why we got here today. I'm not going to read, as I did the rest of this week, I'm not going to read any of the bios of our speakers. I'm going to let them talk for themselves because time is always of the essence here. But before we begin, let me just dedicate today's lecture to some people that mean something to me. I'd like to dedicate today's lecture to the memory of Sister Lorraine Turner, Brother William Woodlawn, my brother, Vernon McLean, Brother Isaac Simmons, and a whole host of other people who I cannot name, who I was close to. All of us grew up on the Lower East Side, and the speaker today is one of the people that grew up with me on the Lower East Side. I was pretty close with her brother, Arnold. She may not even know that, but I was pretty tight with her brother, Arnold, who was very important to me as an older person and as a mentor. And our sister here has been very much a part of my life, especially in recent years. Whenever I need her, when I have a death in the family, I can call upon her, and she's there lickety-split. And I can tell you, she always does a good job. And she is no stranger to Kean University. She's been here before, and she has always reminded me that when she came here was her first speaking engagement that she ever did. So I'm happy to say that. So without further ado, please welcome Miss Marsha Lee Watson.
Hold tap. It is indeed a blessing and an honor to be here today before you as we gather to reflect on this history of African Americans. I'm truly thankful to Dr. Connors and to the entire staff at the Africana Studies here at King's College. I would also like to thank my fellow brothers and sisters who have opened some of those windows for us to view in the criminal justice system thus far. We have reaped benefits of our ancestors, and my heart is filled with pride as I look back over this journey. Today, we continue the journey. My standing on the shoulders of giants, we have come a long way, but there is so much more to be done to secure our future. I'm mindful that we must stay vigilant and not narrow that view. However, we must have time and take the time to explore and examine closely everything that in part makes up our race. That brings me to the topic of criminal justice and direct effects on African Americans. The fact is that it is subjected to discussion in the month of February. It speaks to reason and to our concern. Criminal justice has taken on the nickname Just Us. Our men, women, children, and even the unborn disparately represent the criminal justice system. I will elaborate on that point later in this lecture. Criminalizing a race. Criminalizing a race. Free blacks during slavery. Now I'm going to go back and to reflect on one of my mentors, Shashi McIntyre. Shashi McIntyre wrote a book called Criminalizing a Race. She wrote this book in mind for her own graduate because she was a requirement of hers for her doctorate in philosophy at Stony Brook. But most importantly, I want to share with you her views. And according to Dr. McIntyre, she said, what I conclude is that to European Americans, deviant belongs in prisons. And to them, being African Americans is a sign of deviancy. They buttress this, impressed by projecting an imagery of African ancestral traditions and cultural mores of uncivilized. White supremacists would not address or attack the social conditions which force free African Americans into the lowest level of community. Instead, they cited the oppressive regime of the enslaved South or the disenfranchisement, social prescriptions, and economic depression of the free North and contribute these problems to free African Americans. What I want to virtually say to you, what does that all mean? What that all means is that they had an answer to what they thought was their criminal justice problem. They said, well, it's coming from these slaves and their behaviors. And if we can keep them enslaved and keep them under control, we would not be having this problem. So that seems to reason that the first thing to do was to try to get them back into the enslavement or to punish them for things that they could not do because of the conditions. Free. What does it mean to be free? Free. When you're free, you need shelter. When you're free, you need to eat. When you're free, you need some clothes on your back. This they did not have. And any attempt by any human being to obtain those things by African Americans was considered deviant behavior and criminal. So that puts us in the gate of criminal justice. That puts us in the gate of discrimination towards African Americans in the criminal justice system. Now, it's obvious that we need social control. I'm not saying that we need deviant people to be running around and no control of them. But what I am saying to you also is that we need to understand why we are the major people in that criminal justice system. Now, I know you heard the phrase, just us. It becomes that when you look at the criminal justice system makeup of the criminal justice system and the prison industrial system, it's very dark on the inside. And most of the work and the lighter part of the criminal justice system is made up of the administration and the officers. And I say that from my own experience. I'm not taking that from any data. I'm not taking that from any statistics. I'm taking that from my own personal experience. I will tell you that I spent 34 years as a correction officer and other titles in the criminal justice system in New York State. I can also tell you that in 1979, I was the first African American officer to integrate a maximum security prison known as Sing Sing. So I'm talking to you from the inside out. I'm not on the outside looking in. I was in the system for 34 years. I served out some like prison sentence with other people that were incarcerated. So I understand what it is to be discriminated against as a free black and a free woman. Because that I was. But yet, I had to endure discrimination. I had to endure being looked at as not equal. I'm sorry. I thought you all can hear me. I'm always, oh, okay, I'm sorry. Because I know I usually talk pretty loud, and I thought everyone heard me. Thank you. What I'm saying is that the discrimination for women and for the discrimination of African Americans doesn't just lie in the streets of our cities and our communities and our nations, it lies also in institutions. It's called institutional racism, institutional discrimination. Anytime that any institution allows things to happen and do nothing about it, it's institutionalized and it is called what it is. So as I briefly tell you about my own personal experience being incarcerated, I had to watch women and men who were incarcerated and the treatment that they had to endure above the sentence that they were given. See, I want you to understand that I am not saying that everybody in prison is not guilty. What I'm saying is that the disproportion of the treatment that was given to a particular group of people over another group of people in the same institution is what was wrong. The sentence did not stop in the courtroom. The sentence continued throughout the whole term of the incarceration. And I wanted you to understand how important this incarceration is to us as a community. The person in jail is not the only person that's suffering. That has an effect on the entire foundation of the African American family. But today I want to focus more on women, on the incarceration of women. Now, it's understandable that when a man is taken away from the family, it will do some harm. But when a woman is taken away from the family is destroyed. Just think for a minute, not having a mother. And I'm not playing down not having a father. But it's usually the mother who takes on the responsibility after the father has been removed from the home for whatever reason. Now we're talking about the woman, the mother, being removed from the home and placed in the criminal justice system and what effects it has on us. What I also want you to look at is that the incarceration of African American women and girls is a forgotten population. Nobody is talking about a woman being locked up. That doesn't even come, I'm sure that does not have entered anybody's mindset. But you have talked about your uncle, your brother, your cousin, or so-and-so is locked up. He may be in Sing Sing, Greenhaven, Dannemora. I know somebody locked up. You do, but you never, ever speak about women. I'll tell you my experience going to Bedford Hills for the first time. First of all, I didn't know that many women could be locked up. I was taken by the facts that, well, how did all these women, what did they do? What could they possibly have done to be in prison? Then I had the fortunate opportunity to work on the long-termist floor, which meant that every inmate that I came into contact with had a minimum of 10 years. They were facing 10, 20, 30 to life. This was not a small population in relevance to missing mothers and women from our community. The reason they don't talk about it much is because when you compare men and women, there's more men, so therefore you think very little of women. But we must begin to look at this problem and look at the reasons and some of the causal factors that surround this. And that's what we'll do and talk about today. Now, I'm not the best with the PowerPoint, but I do want to show you this. Women are still dealing with a multitude of issues. And as we look at some of these issues, the family structure, traditional and non-traditional. We have our traditional family, the mother, the father, the children, and then you have your non-traditional family as the tradition, your extended family, the community, and other people that are affected by the issues that women may have. We also look at gender discrimination. I just briefly discussed that. You know there is a gender discrimination. Does everybody here agree with me to some extent? Do you think that there's any equality? We are still fighting for equality. So you know there is definitely some gender discrimination still going on. There's some people that women cannot do. As I also am a reverend, I'm an ordained minister, there's some ordained women ministers that still cannot be senior pastors in churches. So I'm just want to tell you that we are still dealing with some discrimination factors. We are dealing with discrimination in employment. Women were not getting paid the same. Women could not take the same jobs. Women are just beginning to have some of the same jobs that men have, and still not being paid on the same scales. Like I said, back in 1978, when I had to go to Sing Sing, the reason there was a lawsuit that was put up that officers, female officers, were not allowed to work in maximum security prisons. But after fighting that we were officers just like the men were officers, we finally won the lawsuit, and I was one of the ones picked to integrate that. But that was not an easy integration to be made. I still face discrimination. I still face slander, abuse, as I had to do the same job. And then I was not always given the same jobs as my male partners were given. So we know that women, that is not just going to jail is disturbing, it's also they're going to jail facing some other discriminations. And so domestic violence. That is another one of the things that women face. Women may find themselves in jail based on a domestic violence situation or case. Now, there were times before the law changed that women who fought back were locked up and got sentences for defending themselves. And when they fought back, and when they finally fought back and something happened, women found themselves being arrested and put into jail. Now, when you look at lack of education, ignorance, not knowing, not understanding, making poor choices. Today, you are fortunate. You're sitting in a university campus, and you can view from your seat what is happening to someone who does not have the mindset or education that you have to make choices. Because even when they do make choices, they change the name of the game. They call it white collar crime. They even give that a little education. I mean, if you got a good sense, you could do a better crime than there's a white collar crime. But a lack of education on you is just a crime, and it's just a terrible thing, and you are a beast, or you are this and you are that. And that's what happens to women who lack the education. They make poor choices. And some of those choices are following their man. He's involved in some situations. They feel a strong bond to that man. They feel obligated to do what he's doing. A lot of women are in jail for just that. Now, there was Kenya, I think, I don't want to mispronounce the name, but I think Virginia. She had one of the biggest cases where what she did was she with drugs, all she did was be with him during the time he had a large quantity of drugs on him, and she got sentenced to almost 25 years to life. and she was a college student at Hampton University. So I'm talking about relationships too, and choices that you make, and how this plays on a woman. Also, when we look at the mental health issue. Now, I can speak on mental health all day because there was a time when we didn't even discuss mental health. It was taboo. And you know, you were just crazy and you were just set aside. And in society today, most of the time, that's how they treated people who had any issues mentally. Because physically, they always can send you to the doctor. Physically, if your arm or your leg is broke, there's something they can mend it with. They still, to this day, do not have anything that can correct the mind to the extent where it can function without being sedated and imprisoned. And what I mean by that is put away into a mental institution because they don't know how to deal with the problem. Today we deal with schizophrenia, bipolar, we have depression. Now, depression is something that most people suffer with, but they don't deal with it. And so there's women out there who are depressed, don't know how to deal with the situation that they're in, and they find themselves doing things that they would not have done if they were not depressed at the time of doing it. Never do anything. I said there's always I always use this halt. Never do anything when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. You halt, you stop. But then again, that brings us to the education. Everybody doesn't know that. Everybody doesn't have that free choice. You can only do what you know to do. If you don't know to do it, you can't expect to do it. And these women with mental disorders and stuff had very limited choices of what to make and how to deal with that. And in the prison system, the criminal justice system does not take away the fact that you have a mental illness problem. They'll just put you in jail with the problem. And then they'll send you to a part of what we call the satellite clinic. So you still go to jail. The issue of your mental health, the issue of your lack of education has still not been addressed to this point. So we're really not making any rehabilitation changes, are we? All we're doing is making a temporary fix with no compassion or understanding to the individual which we are inflicting these things on. That has to change. We also look at the personal points of views, which I pretty much went over some of my points of views and some of the things that I have went through and watched while being incarcerated. I remember, I'm telling you, when I was here back in 1994, one of the students asked me a question. And that question was, what are you first? Are you a correction officer or a woman? And I told him then that was the easiest question I ever had to answer. I said, I'm a black woman first. I said, I will not always be a correction officer, but I'll always be a black woman. And today I come back only as a black woman. I come back as a retired law enforcement officer. But I'm still a black woman. I'm still concerned about my sisters that are in a system that is not geared nor concerned about change and making a difference in our lives. That comes from us. But I do want you to understand the fundamentals of the criminal justice system enough so that you'll understand and know the importance of making change and being a change agent. Because what the criminal justice system do, they shift according to incidents, according to the nature of which way society is moving. That's the way the criminal justice system is going. You know, they started making a business out of it when it started getting very lucrative to them. Then they had the prison industrial complex. Now we have what they call courtcraft. Everybody is making money. In fact, all that the inmates that were housed upstate were being placed on people's taxes so that they can claim in that state, they can be claimed for taxes and they will be getting money in that state. So that's why most of your prisons are in the upstate area. They build prisons where they can make money with the prisons. Now, they had 7, I want you to understand, they had 7 what they call work release programs in New York City and the New York State area. But the reason for that was not the concern for the families in the community to be closer to their loved ones. It was not that. It was to alleviate the overcrowdedness in the upstate prisons so they can build more. They said that it was too crowded. They needed more prisons. So what they did, they allowed the inmates that lived in the urban communities to come back down to these work release programs. And remind me, you see I used the word program. I did not use the word prison or institution because it was not that. It was simply a program. So what happens with programs? They open and they close. We had 7 programs in New York City. We had one in Staten Island, Arthur Kill. We had one in the Bronx, Fulton. We had, I think, 3 or 4 in Manhattan. We had Edgecombe, Parkside, and Lincoln, and Bayview. Bayview was the only female work release program. One. And you only could get to be involved in that program depending on your behavior in the prison and other factors that they use. And then at one time they said that no violent crimes could go to work release. So if you had a violent crime, if you had done something like a woman may have assaulted her attacker and may have been in there for assault, she was never going to make it home to New York City or back home until she finished her sentence upstate, until she got paroled, or she would never be able to make that program. The politics behind that was when Governor Cuomo became governor, he changed it. And he allowed for violent felons to come into the work release program. Then you get another governor, and what you get? You get another change. It gets taken away. Women, I just want you to try to imagine what it would be like with your own insight of what prison is like, and all these tales that you see on these TV programs, and this lockup and orange this and all these other programs that what y'all think prison is like is dramatism. I went through 1, 2, 3 riots. And through the grace of God, I survived all 3. One was in Bedford Hills, where the women took over. The other 2 was in Sing Sing. But the issues that they had caught my ear. The injustice that they had to go through while being in prison. Because they were in prison, people felt that everything and anything could be done to them because they were in prison. That is simply not true, and that is simply not correct. you want to make a change, you want to feel safe, then you need to make the person, your enemy, become your friend or your foe. You need to understand that as long as we separate ourselves from one another, we are up against one another. Women are the backbone and the nucleus of our community and our nation. We cannot afford to take the mother out of that. Look at the damage that is being done. Look at the population of foster care. Look at the population of women who have no opportunity to reunite with their children and lose them in the system. I said that I would talk to you a little bit about the unborn. There is a 16% rate of women that's now being incarcerated come into the system pregnant. And that is no go home card for them. They have built nurseries in the institutions. Back in before Bedford Hills was Bedford Hills, it used to be a farm where the women went and they used to call it a farm. Then your child was literally born on a farm. How would you like that on your birth certificate? Place of birth. So-and-so farm, Bedford Hills, New York. Now they have what they call a nursery. Now, through legislative and through some decency, they have allowed women to be escorted off the premises to the hospital to give birth, but immediately return to the institution, and they're allowed to stay with their babies for up to 6 months, depending on the nature of their crime and their behavior factors and a lot of other factors. They can be with their children for a little while, but then that's when we come in, and that's how we all are affected by this. What happens is somebody has to come and take that child. Unless that child goes into foster care. If there's no kinship care, if there's no one in the family ready to step up and take on that responsibility, or the father, someone, and most of the time, in most incidents, the father's probably incarcerated as well. And remember, we talked about some of these issues, they still exist. There's still discrimination, there's still lack of education, there's still mental illness. All those things don't get wiped away. But now we're dealing with another person that had nothing to do with this, that has to be come into the world under those conditions. We need to concern ourselves about our women and what is happening to our women and our girls. Because girls are nothing but pre-women. They're going to go from girlhood to womanhood. Hopefully. That they live long enough that they now today that we don't even talk about murder and we don't talk. I mean, it's just to believe that now I have to stand here and talk to you about somebody may get killed before they reach the age of 20. But it's true. Women are being murdered. Women are involved in situations that causes violence to come their way. Women now have involved themselves in gangs, looking for some type of compassion and family. Believe it or not, gangs are formed on a compassionate component. family. Somebody that understands me. And then they want this initiation. They want you, you know what, show me that you love me. Show me that you care for me. I want you to go out and do this and do that so you'll let me know that you really are with us. Because nobody else understands you. And that's what it is to be a teenager. Because you're in the middle of the water. You're no longer a child. So you far away from the shore, but you ain't nowhere near your destination. So therefore, you still got a long way to go, and that way to go, you need some help along the way, and you need someone who understands you to help you get to where you're going. And for some reason, the only person that seems to understand you is the person in the same situation that you're in. So that's where you get that compassion, the girlfriend and the boyfriend, and I wouldn't go back to be a teenager. I'll skip right on over that. You can bring me right on back up to my 68 years. I'll skip that. I won't go back. It is an emotional time in their lives, and this is what happened to our kids. And you see them on the streets and the subways, lost and feeling only close to that negative environment that has drawn them in through affection and false hope. We need to save our girls. The criminal justice seems to be almost a phenomenon about a road on your journey. If most people believe that you're supposed to pass jail. Like, you didn't go to jail? What? You never been to jail? That's the sadness in it. People believe that going to jail is popular. You know they think it's popular. They still wearing their pants down. They still want to emulate that if they haven't been there, I know somebody that has. And I can relate to them more than I can relate to you. Our women, the dress, the clothes, the way they look, they need to be loved. They need to understand that this is not the end. That incarceration is not the road that you travel. School is the best place to be. I always tell people, when you don't know what you want to do it in school. And then when you graduate and you still don't know what you do, you still got something on your side. Going back to women, staying on this personal point of understanding the importance of women. And we went over lack of education, but I just want to tell you that female dropouts hold a bigger risk than their male components, and we discussed that to some, and I just want you to understand that when girls don't graduate, we all fail. Because if the girl doesn't graduate, then what is the problem will be found in her children? She didn't graduate, so she ain't leading them towards that. And if there is, most of the time people will always say, parents will always say, go to school, but they can't tell you why. Those are those parents. Because they don't know why. They didn't go. They just know you're supposed to go. You know what people say? Go to school. Go get your education. But they don't have it. And children look at that. Children know that. I remember being on the subway and a little girl was asking her mother a couple of questions. She was doing her homework and she said, "Ma, do you know this is," and her mother said, "No, I don't know." So then she asked again. She said, "Ma, do you know if this isn't?" She said, "I don't know." By the third time, the little girl looked up at her mother. "No," she said. She said, "Oh, Ma, you don't know nothing, do you?" And her mother said, "No, it's not for me to know. It's for you to know. That's why I got you in school." You have to understand the importance of education. Education is the one gift that if it's in your possession, cannot be taken away. It's yours to keep and to use to empower yourself, your family, and your community, and this nation. That's what the gift of education is for. And it's priceless. Because it can get you in and out of anything. I tell inmates all the time, the difference between you and me is that I hold 2 degrees and you only hold 1. You have the street knowledge they always want to be proud of. You have the street knowledge. And I said, I got both. I came out the street. I'm a product of the city housing, and I also hold 2 degrees. I got a master's from Lincoln University. I said, now I can handle both. I can handle the street, and I can handle a man. Because I know how to communicate with both. I can come down in the street, but I'll never step in the gutter. You got to step up to me then. Now, I can get on pavement with you, but I'm not stepping off the corner. I'm not. But I will help you get where I am. And if you're ever driving anywhere and somebody wants to go your way, always invite them in. But make sure they're going in the same direction. If they're not going the way you're going, then tell them you can't ride in this cab. And this is what our women need to understand and we need to do. This is what, because this criminal justice system, we can break this down. We can end this stuff. This does not have to go on forever. I just want y'all to understand. I feel like Andy Griffin. I know a lot of y'all are young, so you're not going to know what I'm talking about. But there was a show called Andy Griffin and Marbury, and he was a sheriff. And in Marbury, and he had one crime person that got drunk and got locked up. One person. And he would just open up the cell, let him in. And I said, treat me like Andy Griffin. I don't care if y'all never come here. I can sit up here for those 34 years. I didn't want to see near one of y'all come past me. I'm just there just in case. But it's not to imprison you. You know, and sometimes when we look at that African Americans and we look at criminology and we look at African Americans in law enforcement, and people say, I don't want to be no police officer. I said, well, I think if we don't like police officers, then we ought to be the police officers. Then we don't have to worry about the police officers that we don't like. And the same thing goes with the court officer, the parole officer, the correction officer, and anyone involved in criminal justice. It could be just us, but not just us in, it could be just us out. We can make social change for those who care about it. We can make the social change. They have tried for 32 years to silence me to my outspokenness in view of the inmates. And I knew that I was only a paycheck difference from them. Half of my community was in there. I understood what it meant to make a change about going into the system. We can shut that down. We can shut the system down. Now, if it means that just don't not commit a crime and then we won't go, now we know that's not true. Because I can tell you that I was arrested. And I didn't really commit no crime. I was arrested for impersonation. And this is true. I called up on behalf of an individual in Throsneck area of the Bronx, and I called up on behalf of that individual, and I called up the 45th precinct, which was a very, very prejudiced precinct, and I called up and I spoke on behalf of that individual, and they told me, oh, they spoke nice to me over the phone, but every time I hung up, the individual would tell me when they called me back that they said they don't care what you say, that if they're going to do what they want to do to me and so and so. So I said, okay, listen, I tell you what, I'm getting off duty in a little while. I'll come to the precinct. When I arrived at the precinct, I'll make it short. I was arrested within like 7 minutes. The lieutenant came out, he looked at me, and he said, "Do you know who I am?" And I said, "No, sir." He said, "Well, I'm the lieutenant you spoke to on the phone, and let me see your ID." So I took out my shield and I showed them my ID. They took it, and they arrested me. The only thing they didn't know was at that time, I was the president of the New York City chapter for NAN, the National Action Network, which chaired by Reverend Sharpton. I was also the president of the New York State Correction Guardians Association. And I also knew 4 lawyers. So I wasn't too upset about being arrested. In fact, I felt kind of good because I understood now because my relationship went back to Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And I said, and now they had to sit in the jail cell, certainly I can. When I got to central booking, I want to talk to you all about education. When I got to central booking, I had to be interviewed. And they asked you your name, and then they said, your highest entry into education. I said, a master's degree. They looked at me. Now there's some other people in the bullpen. They said, oh, you got the wrong one now. And then they said, occupation. I said, New York State Correction Officer. They said, y'all arrested your own people now. Now, now they arresting their own people. Because without the uniform, I'm just a black woman. That shield means nothing if I'm not fully dressed in armor. So after I went before the judge, and after they kept me there overnight, and they found I went before the judge, and then they said, okay, we're going to dismiss the case. I said, no, I don't think so. Let me face my accuser. I've been accused of impersonating. Let me face the one who has accused me of such a crime. See, most of the time, then they give you what they call ACD. You know, they want to dismiss it pending, and then they tell you, you know what, 6 months, if you don't get no more trouble, then it's all over with. But I want y'all to understand something about that. They got what they wanted, an arrest. They got a record. They wanted to start me with a record. They wanted to discriminate me in the department. That's what their goal was. They knew that I would not stay in jail, but they knew that they had to start a trail of incarceration for women, black men, black boys, black girls, even you, miss, with your little education. We want you too. But you will not get me unless I willingly give myself up. I volunteered to go to jail. I am not a volunteer slave for you, sir. And what I did, I wound up suing the police department. And then I told them that from now on, anytime that I want to buy a new car, I'll just walk past the 45th precinct. To show you that the discrimination among us, but to show you that we have to look at the causal factors that what makes it easier for them to do wrong. We cannot contribute to that. And we cannot allow them to take our women. That's a no-no. Because taking the women, what it does, it takes away from us as a people on a whole. It diminishes our purpose to grow, our purpose to expand, our purpose to exist. We need to be there. We need to be in the forefront. Women need to be free and kept free by any means necessary. And also, we talked about shortly about violence perpetrated against women and girls can put them at risk for incarceration by forcing abused girls and women into criminal justice system. This is what we talked about. This is what I'm talking to you about, how women get in there. This process is that transforms victims into offenders are the criminalization of women's survival strategies. And we look at by the state through coherence laws, immigration policies, social welfare policies, and law enforcement policies. All of these are policies, and all of these things we all should look at and think about becoming a part of policy making. Because that's another thing that is forgotten. Who's making these policies? Who's criminalizing us? Who's making policies and laws that will inflict negatively upon African Americans? Stop and frisk. Illegal search and seizure. All of these things make a difference. We have to save our women. We have to remember that they are women. And they are women and girls that are struggling in this system, and we must pay attention to them. Because as they slowly take our women away without our noticing it, before you notice, there won't be no women. This is a way of slowing population down. Lock them up. And then find ways to justify it and get us to approve it. It was so disturbing when we had those 7 work release programs in New York City. It was half of our own community that wanted to shut them down. I asked them, when I would ask the families, oh, you don't mind driving 8 miles to Elmira when your family is here on 110th Street. But society had convinced them that deviant behavior had no place there. So where do they go? It's perpetrating what it can continue. The same thing it is with housing and with developments. Did you ever hear something so ridiculous? When you have an application, have you ever been arrested? If you've been arrested, you can't live here. So where do you live? I'm battled by that. They don't want you living in housing. No, you can't live there. You've been arrested. So do they have housing for people, ex-offenders? Yes, they do. Jail. No, go back to where you was living at. Because you can't live here. Now, for those who are fortunate enough that can pull themselves up by the bootstraps, and I said those are fine. Those are those who had boots. I'm talking about the brother with no shoes. Or the sister with no shoes. How is she supposed to pull herself up? With what? Mentoring, prevention is one of our biggest assets. If we can prevent something, that's better off than trying to fix something, isn't it? If we can prevent it from ever happening, we don't have to fix it. But we have to recognize it. And we have to know about it. Abuse and runaway girls, street women and prostituted women, women with untreated addictions, women arrested for economic crimes, sometimes coerced by batterers, and we discussed that. I just wanted women arrested by harming others, either falsely or for defending themselves, women affected by enforcement of discrimination, coercion, welfare, and immigration. Now, immigration is, too, another factor for women. A lot of women are here illegally, and I ran into some women when I was working in Parkside, and one woman, I'll never forget, when I used to give this woman an assignment, the first thing out of her mouth was, "Don't discriminate." And I said, "What?" And she said, "Don't discriminate." And I said, "I'm not discriminating against you." I said, I'm giving you an assignment. So then I asked someone else to interpret, to ask her why she kept saying that. And she said that when she was coming over on the boat, when they was getting here, they told them they will discriminate against you when you get there. Don't let them discriminate. And so that was the only word that she knew. So every time she talked, she said, don't discriminate. Because she knew no other word. Now, I'm telling you, the force of discrimination among this society is at that point where that's the first word you know. Not welcome, something. No, don't discriminate. Because that's how strong the discrimination is in this country, and still is. We can't force people to do things that we want them to do by a law. I want you to understand that. That's a behavior situation. They can tell you how to behave, but they cannot make you feel any different about the way you feel about a situation. That's why they pay you. When you're in law enforcement or any other job, you swear to do this, doing that, and do this, and everybody says yes for the check. Because if you say no, then you aren't going to get paid, you're not going to get the job. So that's why we find you have law officers, police officers that have no business on the job. You got correctional officers that have no business on the job. You got parole officers that have no business on that job. But you can teach them how to behave and tell them they have to behave in this order, but you can't change their mindset unless it's in them for change. The difference is that there's some officers that go in there as change agents, that go in there to make a difference, that go in there so that you can see somebody that looks like you. I was the only female and black in the academy in 1983. And I made sure that every single officer, every single candidate that came through my class graduated. Because I made them stick to the purpose and not forget what your purpose is and why you're here. And I tell the inmates the same thing. Don't forget why you're here and what your purpose is to leave. I used to tell the women that all the time. Don't get caught up in stuff that's going to hold you here, and don't wait to be released, prepared to get released. It's a difference. Some people in school wait to graduate. I prepare to graduate by doing what it is that has to be done to reap the rewards that I want. Incarceration for women can make a difference, but the percentage is so low, that's no need and no place to try to make a difference. Make it in your home, in your community, not in the prison system. Thank you. Here's from the Sentencing Project, Incarceration of Women. I don't know if you can see it clearly, but the incarceration of women is growing up tremendously. And it says currently black women are the fastest growing prison population in America. This is troubling in itself for explorating things is that as with black men, the American criminal justice system treats African American women horribly once they are in the judicial system. Remember, I'm talking briefly, women face rape. Do you know what it is to already be in prison and to be raped inside of a prison? To have your babies taken away from you in 6 months? To have your daughter your young child in the probationary or in the judicial system at a young age, where they getting involved in all negativity, gangs, drugs, and things like that, that affects us. I just want you to understand before I close. All this is about you. If we don't get help, then it won't help us. We have to make a difference by helping one another and lifting one another up and taking one another's hands and redirecting our course in life. I don't have no problem. Let the criminal justice building stay there. I just don't want you to go in it. Now, there's some places I know y'all don't like to go. Make that one of them. It's nothing that you can do. The only two people I ever seen make anything out of the criminal justice system was Nelson Mandela and Malcolm X. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years and came out to be president of South Africa. Malcolm X spent 10 years and read the dictionary in the Bible from A to B, A to Z, and made it and changed his whole outlook on how he looked at things. You can take this time, you could use it, or you can abuse it. This was a magnificent forum, a magnificent time to prevent things from happening. Now I'm going to take the time, if we have it, yeah, for some Q&A. Okay? And thank you very much.
Just listen to that. Well, anyway, we'll give that to her. Thank you so much, my sister, Marsha Lee Watson. Please give her another hand, please. Thank you so much. I think you filled out the week rather nicely, coming behind DeLacy Davis and coming behind Dr. Tyrone Powers. I mean, you said basically the same thing they said, but you focused more on the women aspect of it, but they were saying exactly the same thing. You know, there's an old saying among us, when you educate a woman, you educate a nation. I think Marsha has shown that. So what we're gonna do right now is open it up to questions and answers. My first question to Marsha is, and she's already alluded to this, could you recommend any books? You already mentioned Shashi's book, Our Beloved Shashi, who's been here many, many times. Shashi's book, but if there are any other books that you can recommend so that the people in the audience who are interested in this topic can do some further studies.
Yes, I do. I think I have them with me. Just give me 1 second. Let me review my notes, because I did take some literature out for you.
And we do have a mic for questions and answers,
Yes.
so raise your hand and I'll bring
Yes.
it up.
Okay, you want this while I look? Oh, you have
Yeah,
your
you-
mic. Okay. You know, I do apologize. My biography I do not have at the end of it, but if you email me, I would certainly will. Dr. Connors, I will email it to you, because I do have a.
Well, let me just name a few then, since you can't do it, just
Yeah.
for people to be interested. Marsha already recommended Shashi McIntyre's work, Criminalizing a Race. I would recommend that as a primer for anybody interested in this. You can also read The Real War on Crime. I can't think of the author right now. Also, African Americans in the Criminal Justice System is an excellent book on that. Breaking Ranks is by a white police officer in California that talks about how white police officers see black people and Latino people. So those are just, I think those are four I just named.
They all on my.
Yeah, four of many, many books that you need to get. But the important thing here is to pick up something and read, all right, to study, have the answers, be able to know what the issues are, and be able to have enough information so that not only will you change your life, you can change other people's lives.
Good afternoon. I enjoyed it, even though I know Minister Watson. I really enjoyed and learned a lot from your lecture. Having worked with inmates, what would you say is a way that family and community can interact with inmates to help encourage them to use their time wisely while they're in jail. I think that's what you were saying. But how can family and community, or if they can, be involved with them? What's the best way you would think?
You know what, the best way to be, if it's at all possible, is to keep a open communication. But I want you to understand the way that communication must be, and I say that in here with tough love, because it has to make a difference, because it has to let the person know that I am here for you, but you have to show me that you're not comfortable with being here, and that you do want to return home, and return home in a positive manner. And I say that because it's part of our own prevention. You know, you can tell, I can talk to you this way, and I will want nobody else to talk to my children that way. But what's important is that we stay in communication with our families while they're incarcerated, but do it in a manner in which it is positive. What I'm saying is that you have some people in communication bringing drugs to the individual. That's not what I'm talking about. Okay, so I have to be clear on that. You know, if I just told you, y'all just stay in contact, you stay in contact on the same level, on the same relationship that you are. I don't want that. It has to be a positive relationship.
Thank you so much for your talk. I did learn a lot. I have to go back to the office, but you made me think of something. When you said that we have to take care of our girls, because they're not going to be girls, they're not going to be children. I was thinking how now for these administrations and another ones, it seems to me that if you take that Hispanic girl that doesn't have any papers, even though that girl is going to college, is one less girl having Hispanic babies, and you're way too many already. So we're having the same issue in our communities, and thank you for making me think of that. You're way too many. It's way too many of you. We don't want you to be a majority.
Right. And you know, it's important that we understand that we're in this world to multiply, but there is a process in which we can do it in a healthy way. I don't want people to give up on having children.
No.
I just want them to have children. There's an order, you know, in a way in which we do things, and we can do it, and to mentor and to spend more time with our children. Quickly, I'm just saying that, you know, with all the technology that we have, we still need to get at that kitchen table for 5 minutes together. You still need to let that girl know that she matters, even though she may not want to do it, but enforce a tradition in your household, that in this house, this is what we do, and then they will imply that into their own minds and set, and believe me, it will go with them.
Yes. Thank you so much.
I'm good.
How you doing?
Thank
I
you.
really enjoyed this talk. One of the things that I was thinking about was when you mentioned about the people in power disconnecting the community from our brothers and sisters in jail. And as an African American male, I'm the only one of my grandmother's grandsons who have not been locked up at all. But I also was one of those people that completely separated myself from my cousins because there is a stigma attached to that. And in my mother's house and my father's house, that was one of the things, like, you know, you don't want to go there. And then through education and school and stuff, you don't want to go there. But what do you say for, like, I kind of, through like talks like this and my own little research and then watching the 13th on Netflix, like I kind of like, I felt real guilty about my attitudes towards my own family members. What do you say for other people that are doing that?
Well, that you mean that are disconnecting themselves?
Yeah, disconnected.
But you know, it all depends what type of disconnection it is. You see, you know, when you're disconnected, you could be disconnected in a way that you can be connected. Or you can be separated or serviced from something. And I don't think that that's what it is with you, because you are aware of your family. You are aware of what's going on with them. It's just that you don't want to be in the environment at a time that may cause some harm to you. But I also remember this. They also are looking at you. You also are being an example to them. They also want to be like you. Believe it or not, they are probably proud of you and what you're doing. So you continue to do what you're doing because it makes a difference in their lives as well. And the disconnection, as long as it's not served, you could be separated in order to build on that separation. You just don't want to sever yourself from it where you don't even know who they are. And I don't think that's the case in your situation.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Has there ever been any, like a concerted, on a deep level, studying the children of women who are incarcerated? And I don't mean just through elementary school or high school, like almost like a tracking system into adulthood, to see where they are economically, socially, and to see what the ramifications are of the mother being incarcerated. I just want to know, how deep does it go?
It doesn't go deep enough, but it does go deep. Some people do touch bases on it. Certain organizations do carry their own track, and all of those are mentoring programs and different. Green Hope is a program for previously incarcerated women. They keep some sort of track of the recidivism rate, of how they're coming back, what the child is doing. The same thing like they do in foster care. And some, you know, with children who find themselves in foster care, how many of those children actually reunite back with their original families? How many of those kids get adopted? How many teenagers is a major factor in the poor rate of adoption. And I always remind people that a baby is an older teenager. That's all. People want to adopt babies and don't want to adopt teenagers. And a teenager is only an older baby. But there is some, it all depends what program it is and how that program is set up, that you will find some of that information. But again, it's a forgotten population in view of the way we look the world on a whole. You're welcome.
I will ask my question first, and then I'll tell you why I'm asking the question. But I would like you to say something about that once a person has a criminal record, it is very hard to find a job. And let me say how I found this out. Last summer, I went to Miami, and I had to take a bus every day. And on the bus stop, this, homeless guy from Cuba starts talking with me. And we kind of became friends during those 2 weeks. He has, a prison record, and I asked him, what did you do, if you can tell me? He got, a traffic ticket, and he was living from paycheck to paycheck. So he could not pay the traffic ticket, and they issue a warrant for his arrest. So he ended up in prison, and after that, he says, it's now impossible for me to find a job. I don't know if what he told me is true or not, but it is obvious that he was homeless. So I wonder what you can say about a person who has been in prison, then being unable to find a job, even though the offense may be nothing. It's not really a criminal act, okay?
Well, that comes from what happens, the hopelessness that is inbuilt in your thinking about yourself and your self-esteem, and about the crime, and about the environment in which you're traveling in. He may be in an environment where there is no jobs, and laws, depending on what country and what state you're in, they vary. In New York State, they're now doing away with, in some applications, do you have a criminal record, what you can put on that, what you have to divulge and what you don't have to tell now about yourself when it comes to, whether or not you have a criminal record. But that, basically, I can't answer that question because it varies from state to state and country to country, and what the laws are pertaining to previously incarcerated individuals and employment. And it's just like voting, you know, like a lot of people believe that they couldn't vote, and so they didn't. But you could vote. It all depends what kind of felony it was in New York State. You know, if you got a conditional release. And see, there's other things that I can tell you about New York State, but I cannot elaborate on other states, and it varies from state to state and country to country.
Hi, I really enjoyed hearing you speak today. It was really amazing. My question is, I know you mentioned briefly that the mass incarceration of women is not as focused on in comparison to black men because the numbers are less. But I think overall, in terms of just mass incarceration, police brutality in general, why do you think the struggles of black women and girls are not on the forefront in the black community, or are not as focused on in the black community?
Because they generalize it. They generalize us in the fact that we're all just talking about, we are so overtaken by the discrimination rate of incarceration and the prison complex that we don't even look and consider to break down the gender and notice that our women are flowing in the waters with them. You see, we are upset about incarceration, period. But so therefore, we have not noticed and paid attention to the women and children that are flowing in that stream with them as well. And now, because of this this lecture and this forefront, and I do have to give Dr. Connors some credit for my subject, because he was actually the one who said to me, well, maybe you ought to say something about the women. And then when I started knowing that I spent so many years with women, I went back and I started talking to some of the women that I spent time with in the prison system. I spent to the officers, and I said, you know what? God has really sent me here to say, listen, pay attention to them, because they are the most important. And I think that I have to give the enemy some credit, because he's so busy. He was smart enough to know to incarcerate the women. He would know that it would knock down our population. He knew that imprisoning women, I also found out that they don't pay much attention to gender needs inside of probation and parole for women. The needs that I brought up are not needs that they even think and consider. When you get locked up as a woman, you just get locked up. You don't get locked up as a woman. You get locked up. So therefore, they're not addressing some of the women's needs, but they're beginning now to look at it gender-based. And that's what's coming in. It's bringing to light that we have to look at things gender-based.
You know, when you raised the issue earlier in the slide presentation of gender discrimination, the thing that popped up immediately in my mind, I mean, there's many things, but this one popped up immediately in my mind because it was in the news recently, was the whole issue of George Zimmerman. We all remember George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin. But what many people don't know, in Florida, there was a sister who had a problem with her husband or boyfriend or something,
I was gonna
and
bring that
picked
up,
up a pistol and shot a warning shot, all right? And the sister was convicted, and I don't know how, she had a whole bunch of time.
Yes.
You know?
She just,
yeah.
yes.
And just
She just got appealed. She just won the second appeal, and it was the second appeal. It was not the first one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, how, you know, again, that's a combination of a whole lot of things. That's a combination of racism. It's a whole bunch of things going down there, because clearly black people do not have the right to stand your ground on any issue. So that's another thing, and that's happened many times. I was also thinking, because I've spent a lot of time speaking in prison. Our librarian here, Eleanor McKnight, knows that Barbara Wheeler and I used to go to, what's that, Northern State Prison all the time and speak to the population. We were there with the football great Harry Carson and other people, so we all spoke on the same program. But I remember the first time I went, I don't know whether this prison still exists or whether it's whatever they call it now, Fort Bell Women's Prison in Brooklyn, right on the border between Brooklyn.
Yes.
You know it,
Yes,
right?
it's
And the
close.
first time I went there to speak to a group of women, I had never been in a women's prison, and all of these sisters came down. And just what you said, Marsha, all of the stories were exactly what you said. You know, and I know it might have been a couple hundred that we spoke to on that particular day. You know, it was just amazing. And this was my first time. This was a long time ago. You know, I think it was even, it might have been 27 years ago, you know. but at that prison. And I was there with some celebrities, and the brother, we call him Heb Koo, but his name is Walter Johnson, who played with Jim Brown in the Cleveland Browns.
Oh, okay.
He was
Okay.
there with us. He's a good friend of mine, and a group of us. But it just reminded me, everything that you said hit home, because I had that experience. And that was the first and only time that I've ever spoken in a women's prison. But it was a very, very impactful statement for me. And it makes me understand even more why I have to keep doing what I do here,
Yes.
and educating and so on and so forth, and getting all the hate mail and all that other stuff that I get. But it's important that I do it.
Well, that means
Yeah.
you're doing something right.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Hi, I just want to thank you so much for coming to our school
Oh,
and
my
speak.
pleasure.
I came in late because I got let out of class early. My professor said her dog had surgery, but I don't know. But what you said was it stuck with me because my aunt did something that wasn't so great, but she did it because she had to make money somehow. And then she was pregnant, so my cousin was born in jail. He graduated from Dartmouth University in 2012.
Oh, bless
but
him.
I'm seeing that the reason why he was, I guess, not a statistic or didn't turn out the sadder story is because the family rallied around my aunt and didn't, just dismiss her. They knew she was suffering and she needed people around her, and rallied around her child as well. So I've seen firsthand what you're telling us to implement with our families and our friends. But I wanted to know, because this really makes my heart heavy seeing all of this. Like, what can I do as a student so that I don't have to see stuff like this? Like, what can I do as a student? What awareness can I bring? Like, what kind of action can I do?
Well, first of all, you already started with the mindset of making a change and the positiveness that's in you. And when it's what you represent and what people see. You may be the only good thing a person ever comes into contact with. See, because sometimes, like I said, as a reverend, I just have to say this. Everybody don't go to church, but that's all right. But the church goes to everybody. You see, I'm here. You're there. So they will see you. You can get involved in the mentoring programs that they have for women. The rites of passage. I didn't get a chance to talk. For a minute, I was afraid I didn't have enough to say. Then I didn't get to half of what I wanted to say. I wanted to talk about the rites of passage for women and the things. But this is the place. You're in the place. And this is the place where we recruit. This is the place where we come together and we say, change is coming. Because each and every one of y'all are change agents. So what you're going to do, you're going to make a change by just exposing yourself to those less fortunate. And so they can see, they can have someone to emulate, someone to look after, and someone to do. You're in King's University. That's going to make a difference to your friends and to your family. But again, I say, get involved in a rites of passage, go prison ministries. I'll leave my email with you guys if anybody wants to call me and further elaborate, because I do have a lot of other resources and that I can, get that back to you. And I'll be sure to want to dialogue with you some more, and anything that comes up, I sure will pass it on to you.
But she, actually, she is doing a whole lot.
yeah,
She
and
may
I
not
figured
realize
that.
it.
That's
She's
something-
in the leadership of the Pan-African Student Union. And anytime they need something, they call on me, and I'm outside in the cold in front of the flagpole just a couple of weeks ago lecturing and whatnot. She is doing anything. I know it seems like you're not, but you are doing a whole lot. And I want to make sure that you continue doing what you're doing. I'm always here. All right?
Yeah.
So
I
continue
figured
doing
that.
what you're
That's why I
doing.
said she's doing it.
Oh, and I just want to thank her for her concern. I can see she is an activist. But it reminded me after the Attica
Right.
riot in the 70s, I was on a college campus. And, well, for one thing, we have to continue to resist. And since you are here, one of the things that one student group did was started an art in prison workshop. And so they organized, the students organized. Of course, they're organized around Attica at first, but after that, they organized some other people on campus, professors. Professor Benny Andrews, who has now, is an ancestor, headed up. The students got him to head up that program. So I'm saying with other student leaders, learn try to get other people involved, and know that you also have to get people to agitate and hold legislators responsible for what's going on. So those are two things students can do. Thank you.
Okay, before we end our session today, I just want to remind everybody that at 3:30 today, we're going to have the jazz concert here. And, you know, we're going to open it up. We have some people, students who are going to perform with the jazz musicians later on, who are going to do spoken word and poetry, as long as it's positive, okay? We want you to do that. And so we have a list and so on. So my good brother and a friend is going to be here, Renee McLean, and we're going to just have a good time. So I want all of you guys to come back. You're going to hear some good music, and we're going to have a good time. But before we go, I just want to acknowledge the presence of one of my brothers and one of my homies from the Lower East Side. I saw him out the corner of my eye, Brother Elliot Mooring, who's here today. He came probably all the way from Pennsylvania.
Yes, he did.
But he's one of my brothers from the neighborhood, from the projects. We all grew up together.
Yes.
And I just wanted to make sure he gets some accolades and some recognition. So thank you for coming out, and hopefully we'll see you this afternoon at 3:30. I think Renee is probably on his way if he's not here already. He told me he'd be here to set up the stage. And please come back. You're going to hear some good music and some good poetry. And too bad I don't play anymore because I pull out my trumpet, but
Right.
some days is gone. Thank you for coming out.
God bless y'all.
Marsha, oh my God. Before everybody
And goes, yeah, oh yeah.
want to, part of our tradition is that we take a group picture on the stage. Everybody can be in it. All right? So please come up on the stage. Licia. No, Licia, she should be outside. Hold on. Yeah. We got to get the camera. What's up, Al?
Take your picture, my man.
Okay. Okay, listen, you're gonna
Yes, I'm taking your picture.
Licia. Can you take the picture? Tradition is that we take a group picture on the stage. Everybody can be in it. Okay. All right? So please come up on the stage. It's like 30 seconds. Yeah. Okay. We're gonna go right up on the stage.